I'll go ahead and get started. So just let's get moving in terms of introductions. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Getting Started with AI, a webinar series for innovators. It's MVPs for AI development, but we'll just do quick introductions at the top. My name is Bob Klein. I'm CEO of Digital Scientists, and I'm happy to have everybody here and want to turn things over to for introduction to Josh Brown, our Director of Engineering.
Hey, I'm Josh Brown, Director of Engineering and Chief Architect at Digital Scientists. Been here over 5 years. I've been in the industry about 20 years. Worked on a lot of different applications, and educationally, I have a background in math and computer science with an emphasis in AI. So excited to be here.
Great, welcome, Josh. I think it's I needed help on this one, everybody. So let's go ahead and dive in. But first, I've got to share the deck so you can see what the heck I'm talking about. Okay, how's that look, everyone? So like I said, getting started with AI, this is the third in a series. So we've got 3 different webinars. This is number 3. First 2 are the readiness workshop and the opportunity assessment. And the goal of this this webinar is really to talk through actual building out AI projects, making AI investments in a really managed, kind of low risk approach with a focus on ROI. It's probably targeted more for folks in the enterprise where you have to get started building out your capability somewhere. And this is the way that you can do it. So this is kind of creating um, new functionality that leverages AI, and we'll get into that in a bit more. So just quickly about us, about Digital Scientists. We're a technology strategy and innovation firm based here in Alpharetta, Georgia. We're roughly represent a team of almost 85 people. There are probably roughly 20 full-time employees in the United States, and we have a team in product development that works in the near shore. So it doesn't matter these days where people are located. There's a big focus we have in terms of getting close to the user problems, understanding their needs, and driving implementation all the way to the outcome. So it says down at the bottom here, we want to be part of your success story. So we help clients deliver on new applications, new solutions, and these days that often involves AI. Oh, and it's not always black and white here in Alpharetta. It just happens to be probably a shady day. Walk through the team a little bit more. We're really a very experienced team. I mean, Josh, I mean, we talk about being gray-haired. Not everybody has gray hair. I might have the most, but it's really a cross-functional effort for both product management, research and design and development. We'll talk a little bit more about recommended team composition and skill sets specifically for AI MVPs. This is just a little bit more about us. Why are we launching this series? I think it's important to help people get started. Oftentimes they're looking for a place to get started. Launching this series, this is actually a video from kind of the launch of a recent help me, Josh, the SpaceX, sorry.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yep.
The SpaceX launch, I thought was really cool, the idea of kind of launching something new. But there's, in most corporations at the enterprise, there's a gap between ambition and the ability to execute, so, and if you're in an organization that's doing this just to get started, you need a way to get started in a way that shows results. And I'm used to working with clients that say, where's my ROI? why would I even bother doing this? Kind of why get off the sidelines? And um, folks who want to innovate in AI, they need some structure of how to do this. So some of this is just really a chance for us to share our approach to the way these things work. Um, the agenda for today is really a little bit of discussion from the previous webinars, things that we have covered around readiness, governance, opportunities, and then walk through an framework for running AI MVP experiments. Look at look at the use cases, and really going to walk through the approach for building AI MVPs around blueprint model, productize, implementation phases, and then talk about the overall journey. But um, let's jump into it. Oh, and this is another SpaceX video I thought was kind of amazing just to see the ability to return these uh, launch vehicles back to Earth and land them. So it's amazing. Uh, from our first webinar about readiness, really a readiness workshop, it's laying the foundation for running AI MVP experiments, right? Or developing with AI. And a lot of it involves understanding what needs to be in place so you can do this. And it goes to questions around planning and data governance, security, privacy, data quality. So, AI involves building on top of assets that you already have. So you want to make sure those assets are in a good state to support AI, which is in a way, some people, you might think of it almost like a brain. So, or insights. You want to be able to trust the data that you're using as a foundational element for AI services. Now, in our second webinar, we talked about opportunity assessments, right? So how to hone in on what are the right AI opportunities in your organization. It's a little bit more around planning, but building the business case. Why would you spend money on it? And what would the ROI look like? And we talked about returns in terms of productivity, real-time decision insights, and possibly like IP capture, new service development. So I talked about this framework, which is really from the Boston Consulting Group, also known as BCG, in these three areas, a framework around deploy, reshape, invent. And it's just kind of a quick overview of what those meant. But really today, in terms of this framework, we're going to talk more about AI MVPs in the area of reshape and event. So if you're in deploy, you can see there under the tech line, it says off-the-shelf software. So deploy is where, your company might have introduced Microsoft Copilot, or your development team might be using GitHub Copilot, or you're using ChatGPT in the enterprise. So these are off-the-shelf solutions, right? That your team might be using for AI to create productivity, right? So that's not the topic of our discussion today. So that's really a procurement decision, although it will impact your internal workflows, right? So I'm talking more about reshape and invent as kind of the areas where you're going to decide whether to build or partner and potentially some buy, right? So it's like, how do I get invested in AI? And I'll talk about those two areas. So with reshape, you're trying to transform functional workflows with AI. So it's going to require some development of a solution internally. You may have to build it, you're likely to have to build it and integrate it into your existing IT ecosystem, right? So why would you do this? It's to um, it's because you would see a benefit. Help me here, Josh, in terms of like where it's like you're not inventing necessarily something altogether new, but you're optimizing your workflow. You're kind of making
Optimizing optimizing workflows.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So in a core function, like how to do something more efficiently, but you
Mhm.
can't, um, somebody might be in an existing application and then it has to go off and do something and that's optimized with AI and bring a result back, right? And let them kind of rejoin their workflow. So, or there's reducing steps in the existing workflow. So, I don't, I kind of save time. I create productivity, right?
Mhm.
And in the workflow. So that's reshape. This is Boston Consulting Group, and they're big and expensive. Don't tell them I said that. No, they're a very sharp group. I'm borrowing their slides because
Yeah,
I like
it's
the way
fine.
that they think. Um,
And it,
but go ahead.
yeah, it may improve an efficiency of a workflow, but it also just might improve decision making for somebody, right?
Yeah,
So
save
it can
the
give
time.
different types of benefits to that workflow.
Yes, and there's a lot of words here, so we won't go into that. But that's kind of the point around
Mhm.
that. Those kinds of solutions are still kind of they can be kind of back office. They can touch different functions. Now, the other one I think is interesting is Invent, which is really develop AI native offerings. This is dream up kind of new services, new potentials, new opportunities that leverage AI out of the gate, right? So you're not trying to improve something that already exists. You're seeing the potential and building something greenfield, really brand new. Um, and you can see down here on the left-hand side what is Invent. They, elevate customer value proposition, unlock new business models and revenue opportunities, right? So if you want to grow revenue or build new services, that's the kind of phase that you would be in. Um, and those, like I said, those are the two areas where you would use an AI MVP, right? So you're either going to optimize existing workflows or you're going to build something new. Okay. Um, I covered this. This is a really a process model or framework for running an AI MVP from our friends at the little company called Google. And I liked it because it showed how it's slightly different from a traditional minimum viable product, um, where you have kind of an upfront process to define, go through a design sprint and a user journey. You understand some of the needs and might create a design in terms of understanding the user interaction, like with a potentially changed workflow. But we also have this piece where you have to kind of create the AI model. So here on 1 through 5 feels like a traditional front end kind of blueprinting process. So understand the user, the workflows, visual design, functional, a clickable prototype. That's 1 through 5. And line 6, design, iterate, and build AI models, prototypes. That's the part where you're testing out the model. Can you build an AI model? Can you have confidence in the data, the outputs? Is it worth proceeding? So, and then the last part is when you integrate those two things together. That's your AI MVP. All these images make it look really simple. So they have 7 steps. Now, the team that you need to execute on something like that really is cross-functional, like I mentioned. So it's product managers, designers, engineers, um, the folks that understand the risks inside your organization in terms of getting something done, working with your internal team or internal stakeholders. So I see here AI consultants. There's also an education that's required. So your stakeholders understand what's going on. The whole effort here, oftentimes with an AI MVP, is to remove the concept of a black box. For the users to trust the outputs of an AI model, they need to understand what's going on. They may not understand everything, but it's important to make an effort to explain.
Yeah, and I would just add that with a project like this, you have so many different skill sets and backgrounds and personality types that arise out of a situation like that, that it's very beneficial to have an integrated team, people who know how to work together already. or else you spend a lot of time, you have a lot of communication overhead otherwise.
Absolutely. Right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a large team, but you need the different skill sets. Um, okay. Now, the last slide before we really kind of get into the details is an example of an AI MVP that we built here at Digital Scientists. It's called Health Context AI. And the challenge was for a client that had a telehealth platform, and they were looking for a way to better document the telehealth um, encounters between providers, doctors, and patients. And the notes that were being taken by the providers were not very good or very detailed. And it seemed like there's an opportunity to improve the notes that were taken specifically for the doctors to help save them time. It also creates maybe a way to summarize what actually took place in the telehealth session with the patient. So,
And it
um,
also it turns the telehealth conversation into another data point for the medical record that didn't exist before, because it used to be that these conversations would be ephemeral. All you would have would be the notes, right?
that's great. Good point. And I think this is some of the learning of the of generative AI is just the value of audio. So we're starting to see how important audio is, and it's in a way like another data type. How do I make sense out of it? And the generative AI models around transcription have proven to be very strong, but they're not 100% accurate. I'm not sure I've ever met anything that's 100% accurate, but I think that's, you know, we put this together in probably 6 months time, and it's since kind of turned into really an important feature in this telehealth platform. So it's available, it's on our site and all. But I think the just like any other thing, a lot of the effort was initially into the modeling itself. Can we make the services work? We didn't build all these services, so there are models that we had to develop. There are services that we used that were external. Some of them came from Amazon Web Services. Some of them, it's hosted at Azure. It has to be HIPAA compliant. It has all these things that are kind of required to build out. But first and foremost is the transcription any good? Does it work? Um, and we also label everything here that looks like a medical term. And then once you have that information, you can do something with it. So inside your organization, you know, there are a lot of good services like this already, like Otter, or even Google Meet does it, or Zoom, where the transcription makes for a good note and saves people time and lets them focus. And some of the idea here was we don't want to distract the doctor from their patients, but we do want to help the doctors make sure they captured everything that took place in the encounter. I guess what else, Josh, do you think is relevant um, for this case study?
Um, I think you touched on with the HIPAA. I was gonna say there's definitely a security element here. So
Yeah.
it's not as simple as just pulling something off the shelf to make something like this work. And I think we also infer ICD codes based off of the context in the conversation, which can be useful for the doctor. So anything that can reduce the bureaucratic burden of a provider is good in my opinion. I think that's a big challenge these days.
So you might think about inside your organization how audio could help. And, it's used all over. If you have a call center, what are you doing with that audio data? And that's, back in the opportunity assessment, what data do you have? What value is there that maybe you're missing? All right, let's move on. So kind of Google had their 7 steps. We've got only 4, Josh. Um,
Mhm.
Blueprint, model, productize, and implement. So we'll start with blueprint, and it's really define and validate that opportunity that's been brought in, and it's a phase to kind of validate the opportunity, define the approach with really a goal, to walking through these kind of key activities where um, with many new products or new solutions that get developed, workflow analysis, journey mapping, understand the value, the data kind of assessment of what's there, what requirements are there, user interaction design, and kind of what does success look like, success criteria. With the primary deliverables, this could be as short as 2 weeks. A clickable prototype, maybe something in Figma, and a solution architecture thought through a document, to define, okay, what is this going to look like? And I really look at this blueprinting phase for an AI MVP as a bit of a commercial, art of the possible. So what's possible? How is this going to impact somebody's workflow? And what is it going to look like on the other side? And for senior leadership, they need a visual to understand how is this going to impact things. And they also need a bit of accountability when it comes to success criteria. So is this going to save an hour out of a doctor's day, or 30 minutes, or if it's productivity, is it going to generate actual ROI? Probably unlikely. Like, where is the return on investment? That'd just be my advice for anyone investing in kind of technology solutions, and that would be out of IT planning. But what do you think, Josh, in terms of this phase? It's it's pretty similar to other things. What's the different part here around AI MVPs? Like, what would be different?
What's different here? I think it's going to come down to data assessment and requirements. I think that the big differentiator, if I'm referring back to the Google slide that you had up before with their 7 piece,
Hmm.
the one that was kind of hidden in there, it was like kind of slipped in, was the AI use cases.
Yeah.
And so this is the idea that you can map a problem to an AI solution. And this is where you really need a certain amount of experience with AI to kind of be able to suss out what that looks like or what the possible avenues are. And so coming in here to the blueprint phase and putting down your requirements, your data assessment is really giving you the bounds to work within so that you can solution. So I think that's where I see things being different.
Yeah, that's you don't I guess you wouldn't typically get to all that level of detail. It's
It's a little
could be
different.
slightly different. And I did have something in the earlier webinar around governance where I saw like an AI service that I think you could use to set up to try and assess the quality of your own data, like a data assessment more around quality or kind
Yeah.
of completeness and integrity and other things, like to because this you don't have time to fix all of those things here, or they can bog you down. And
Mhm.
but you want to know, a lot of the output um to be successful is like you've got to have a confidence um in the model itself, the data that comes out, the answers that come back. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, that's the modeling. So that's the next phase. So blueprint is kind of where we get started, and you end up with a clickable prototype and solution architecture and some success criteria and some better kind of handling. And the solution architecture includes, like, okay, where's the data going to come from, and setting up um, the next phase. So kind of covered some of this in terms of considerations. It's important to come out with a business value, the technical feasibility. This is kind of planning. Stakeholders, you kind of create that that's clickable prototype to keep the stakeholders aligned. Don't overpromise, and then you set up the resources. Um, the pitfalls, of course, stakeholders aren't engaged. They need to understand enough about how this is going to impact the organization. The data assessment wasn't complete, so um, you might be building on data infrastructure or data resources that are a little wobbly or tenuous or incomplete. Um, and success metrics is every project needs that, so that's not anything specific to this
Mhm.
phase. So Why would you start something if you couldn't just define success? All right, model, develop and test AI capabilities. Go ahead, Josh. Why don't you cover this
Sure,
one?
sure. So yeah, with the model phase, um, it's like a traditional software lifecycle at this point, but there are things that are a bit unique to developing with AI. A lot of this has to do with you have a set of data typically that you've accrued over the course of your business life or that you want to make use of, and you're trying to match that against the appropriate architecture to get some result. I think we can go to the next slide. I kind of want to just talk to about the
Okay.
specifics. So this is actually from IBM, and this would be a traditional model build out for an AI application where you have, like I said, you have years of data that goes into a pre-processing phase. So there's always traditionally most of the work was getting the data into a ready state so that it can be trained on. And that's what you see here. And then you would select and train a model. You might iterate over that several times. You'll tune parameters, things like that, and then start evaluating the efficacy of that model that you've trained to get to some result that you can deploy. And so this is, like I said, this is more of the traditional AI approach. I do have another slide next that is geared a bit more toward what we're seeing with generative AI, where you're still starting with your data sources, although now they can really a lot of times be unstructured. You may not have to prepare your data as much as you did in the past. And you're going to start with existing what they call foundational models. And this might be one of the big models that OpenAI or Olama, or it could be something specific that you're pulling from Hugging Face. And a lot of the work here goes into understanding workflows and what you're trying to accomplish. So you have to start thinking, if I had just an infinite number of humans to work on this task, how would they do it, right? And can I model that? And so that's where things have shifted a little bit, in that there's a lot of focus on understanding workflow these days. And that feeds into a phase where you're building out tooling, you may be prompt engineering, and largely orchestrating a set of LLMs to work together. And that's how you get your result, and that's what you deploy. Anything to
I
add to that, Bob? Or
Yeah, why in my mind goes right to the sea of PDFs that
PDF?
most people in the enterprise are swimming in, or the unstructured documents that really the PDF documents that are there, or that
Mhm.
the effort that most people go through to generate documents or to scan documents or summarize them is really where there's a lot of potential for time savings. So I've seen folks approach us where they want to automate, for example, um, part of like a prospecting, right? Where I have to be able to ingest a lot of information, make sense out of it, boil it down, and make a decision, based on it, or set up something else in some other system. So I think that's what's been most fascinating for me is um, the ability for these models, existing kind of foundation models, to use all kinds of information. So PDFs and spreadsheets and text and documents, and to help kind of pull pieces out of that. And it allows for analysis and time saving. So
It's
um,
amazing, yeah. And it benefits you to architect your solution when you're using a foundational model, such that you benefit from their upgrades in the future, you know.
and
And that's
and
something to think about in the architecture phase of this as
and
well.
even being able to read graphics, right? So to read graphics that are in PDFs that are old, and just the ability to access that kind of content has seemed um, really challenging, even just for analysis or research. So it's again back in the opportunity assessment. What are those things where maybe in your organization, content's trapped in a way. I can't get to it. It's not in an application, but this allows you to bring it in. You know, that's where it can really impact somebody's workflows. If all of their job is not in a system environment, so I think about salespeople inside of Salesforce, they're off kind of they're creating a bunch of contents. You know, they're trying to understand things that are offline. I mean, those are sometimes, you know, a sign that the you can make things more run more efficiently. So
Mhm.
um, so we covered the model selection, training, test and framework creation, performance validation. A lot of the modeling is really, you know, in this phase is, do you continue? Let's go through these success criteria. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, sure. So I think the gist here of what you're looking for is reliable data is probably going to be foremost. Are you getting access to the reliable data? Are you evaluating what the AI is outputting so that you can actually say it's a success? You know, um, is the is it going to scale? Is it fast enough? So this is a big problem nowadays. Yeah, I guess just yeah, is it gonna meet those requirements?
And and there's also a cost thing at the end. So I'll just jump to the bottom
Yeah,
there, common
I
pitfalls.
buried that in the third one.
Resources are too expensive. So this stuff isn't free, you all. It's you're gonna pay. And if if the model you have to churn through a whole lot of data, and they're kind of resource intensive, and that'll be a separate conversation, but it might be the result isn't worth the whatever, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, you know, and it can be very expensive. And that's something that back in the blueprinting phase, you'd like to have some idea, right? So is this going to be a lot? That's kind of a little bit of a planning, so you don't um, design something that's it's the result isn't worth the investment cost, you know, and it's anyway, that's out there, right? These kind of these models do cost. And so there is some question about building things internally. You know, the other thing is modeling. Sometimes you don't want to go to these models. You want to do things in a proprietary way, you know. So think about intellectual property and the value of the data you might be working on. So those are also things you have to think about in the planning, the blueprinting, and the modeling phase, because you may not use these foundational models or services. You keep it all in house.
That's right. Or you may have a need for a generative AI model that you need it to we'll say output more consistently and not hallucinate, right? Or not kind of adjust the sales there by itself. And so you can't really rely on some foundational model that continues to evolve. You need to kind of lock that down. Can
Right.
happen.
So let's say the blueprinting went fine, modeling, we're happy with the model we've chosen and the results. The next thing is productize. I really have to kind of transform that model, kind of put the AI model into a functional product with real world workflows. This is might be result in a like a production pilot internally, you know, or beta testers internally. You know, it's I now have a model. Now I'm going to change the way somebody works. So
Mhm.
this is a more traditional kind of design build process where you know, it's already designed in the clickable prototype, but now I actually have to architect and build it and integrate in the third party, whatever the applications, the other systems that are in my ecosystem, run through
Does
QA
it
and
have a
test.
yeah? Does it have a user interface that someone's interacting with? That has to be designed and built. And if it doesn't have a user interface, who manages it and tells it to run and how often to run and knows if it's not running? So
So this is like um, the other MVPs without AI. Now I have, but I now have this data output that's going to change somebody's workflow. Um, it's likely to, and um, so productize. And this is something you're used to doing, but it's you still need internal. You know, for the MVP, you need to know who these beta testers are. Um, and hopefully they need to be involved up front in the blueprinting phase that are defining some of the problems you're trying to solve. So we would consider these users for user research, and they would understand what the clickable prototype involved and have been part of it, and now they get to see, okay, let's try this out, and let's kick the tires. And we'll let you know, we'll provide the feedback. Is this really saving us time? So in some instances, it might be a sales team that gets to try out an AI based service that saves them saves them time when it comes down to kind of maybe creating a proposal or prospecting or whatever, right? So and you want them, they're the kind of stage you have to go through these stages to get to implement. So hopefully you've done your homework and everything lines up. But this is really some of the effort of productizing the AI model. The Josh, the kind of the question here is that can this be integrated into the workflow successfully? Are you seeing the results? Am I happy with the testing? Kind of monitor its performance, and pitfalls are usually poor user experiences, right? So
Yeah,
if it
this is
does,
like, yeah, it's really common, just software product considerations here. I think a lot of software products, most software products die on the vine. As soon as they're launched, they're just not really cared for, and there's things that just need to be buttoned up before that happens, I think, to help ensure success.
I think what we've seen in this area is try and return people to the workflow that they're already used to, and maybe remove some steps, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to show them what's happening, right? So maybe for some of these earlier AI solutions, so they trust it, they get an understanding of where things came from. I don't know. It kind of depends on the solution you're putting together, but it's important for these earlier efforts that you have something that shows a win. So if you take, for our earlier example with health context, if I save the provider an hour of time per day, you know, then they're thrilled, and they're going to look at how things get transcribed. They're going to look at everything. They'll understand transcription's not 100% perfect all the time. And I think it's important to sometimes to caveat the results. Like this was auto-generated,
Mhm.
so just you're setting some expectations about outputs. And even if it's not 100% correct, it's clear like what is the source of record? It's probably the audio file itself, and not the transcription. But it doesn't mean the transcription can't create value, but it also doesn't mean somebody's not accountable or responsible for editing, right? So it's not on autopilot. One of the things here is we leave the human in the loop. This doesn't just this isn't set it and forget it. Oh no, right? Leave the human in the loop, let them, review the results, edit the results, improve the results. All that's valuable for your own model. So if you can get the team to engage and improve the results, your model will get better, stronger, faster, and you'll incorporate all of that learning. And that's really where things, get better over time and can get better a whole lot faster. Josh, any thoughts on that?
I would just say, like from my experience, a big component of success in this domain really comes from alignment, and everybody agreeing with what is being productized and what's going out there, so that the communication's good. Um, just a little non sequitur there, but that's what came to mind.
All right. So in the last phase is implementation phase. I don't know if I was like implement phase, implementation. So um, this is really deploy the whole thing to the organization. And we've got something like this right now where it's being used by a small number of people, but it could eventually roll out to, many hundreds of them. And you won't get sign off on something like this until it's really um, they kick the tires. So this is where an MVP a small one that really solves a problem well, an AI MVP, can be rolled out and can show a real ROI. So, especially like I said, time savings, it deals with things that are productivity related. A lot of the key activities here are around change management. Uh,
Mhm.
you're dealing with a project team that might be kind of all on the same page and aligned and happy to see the results and kind of first movers, but that may not describe your entire organization. So change management involves kind of creating a guide path for the technology change or workflow change, right? You're changing somebody's job. How does that get communicated? How do people get trained? How is there support in that process? All of that's part of the implementation phase. And I have down here, the deliverables really rollout of a new AI-powered workflow and the support monitoring and enhancement of the AI model. I don't want to leave that alone. So, Josh, how should people understand that aspect of the implementation phase?
Which aspects?
Does the AI model, the kind of the care and feeding of an AI model. So you created an AI model. Does it just sit there? Where does it go from there?
It just depends. There's a lot of variety here, so it's a
Yeah.
little tricky to pin that down. It depends on how the AI model is being updated. If it's learning, um, yeah. So the answer is kind of all the above, unfortunately, with that one.
So I mean, the other thing is like we've seen the challenge of, you know, from our perspective, sometimes we partner and help build things like this, and we have to help the other, like the IT organization, take it on board, right? So have to support the model. So they have to understand a little bit more the documentation of how it was built and also how it's supposed to learn, change, and evolve and improve, like I said. So um, the models aren't going to necessarily stay static, so it's not um, it may not be done. It depends on how your model was put together. What
Yeah,
if it involves proprietary information? Maybe you want to bring in new parameters. Maybe you find some cache of PDFs filled with
mm,
gold, and you want it to enhance your model in some way. So that's always an option, but I think it's the organization has to be prepared. And this is just for
yeah.
AI MVPs, this would just be the first of many. So it goes into, okay,
Mm.
how do we maintain these internally? How do we, make sense
Yeah.
out of it? Because it's an
We
ongoing
love to, yeah, we love to set it and forget it and put out something that's just going to get better over time on its own. But there are cases, specifically if you have a model that's working against a regulatory uh, industry, you may need to incorporate new rules and kind of have a mechanism to roll that in, right? So there may be a little bit of retraining involved there.
So we cover some of that here. The success criteria is it reliable? Is it trustworthy? You get user adoption and feedback, and it needs to scale with the organization. It may start without many people using it, but many people may start to use it. And again, the performance matters. Um, I think the other thing that's kind of common is like the security. The more something kind of works its way into a standard workflow, others might start to question it. Where does it come from? So it needs to be highly compliant. And these kinds of things, like any other productization effort internally, requires the change management to know that a new solution was actually successfully rolled out and adopted. Um,
Mhm.
for many people with many tools, they have the option just to say no, or they just won't do it. They want to stick to the existing process. It could be manual. All right. All right. Well, that actually wraps it up. I could have stuck another slide in there just to kind of remind you of that process again, that we just walked through. But that's our AI MVP process. Um, can't do it, but where we go through blueprint, model, productize, implement or implementation. So 4 steps that are important to follow. That's a lot to cover. This
Mm.
has been, MVPs for AI development, really the third in our webinar series. It's complete. And I don't know if there are is anybody online? Is there any questions at all? Looks like we've run over time just a little bit.
We were close though. We were really close.
Right. Yeah, pretty good. Well, thank you everybody for joining or for watching at a later date. If there's any kind of question or all, we're here to help you get started on your AI journey, whatever that entails. Um, and if you just have a question, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. Uh, as Josh, I don't know about you, but I think that the it just feels like with the AI models and the services as software developers, um, we really have a lot of tools uh, to do things that we've always wanted to do, and I think that's what has most of us excited is, wow, just the sheer potential for um, kind of solving big problems and
The
little problems,
potential,
right?
yeah, it's really amazing right now. And the challenge is really just finding some workflow that you haven't heard of that somebody's struggling with, and then telling them, oh yeah, here's what you could do, for
So
sure.
with AI MVP, there's a way to get started, a place to get started, a relatively small investment. You can make multiple AI MVPs and show results. The other thing with a lot of this is that they don't take that long, and you can show results to your organization. Um, and have an impact, right? So, but you've got to be kind of willing to dig in. We partner with firms to do things like this. We'd be happy to work with you or just kind of have a chat. Um, so anyway, thank you everybody for joining, and I'll we'll let you know about the next kind of webinar series. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks. Yep. Thanks, Bob.